same time show that the way they hadn't touched in life.
What I liked so much about that was that you wove it into the text, even interspersed within the same chapter. Frequently you read books that have one chapter is the present, then another chapter you go back in time, and that would be the journal entry. This was seamlessly woven right into the text, so that Elizabeth would be, you have a journal entry there, and then Kate would go into her present life, and then another journal entry, and it would all relate. Did that take hours and hours of editing after the fact, or did that come as you were writing?
I originally wrote it as those two separate threads, and my agent, when she first signed me on, said, okay, now we have some work to do. We're going to chop everything up and slice it and splice them into one another. And then when it was bought by Random House, we re-spliced and spliced again. So it was a tremendous, I'm glad that it looks seamless, but it's sort of more like making sausage. That's it, making sausage. It was long and painful. And, but it's so much better for it, actually. Yeah.
Well, and it's unique from other books, and I have to say, living through, knowing you while you were doing all these edits, it's like, there's another edit, there's another edit. How many times do authors edit their books?
Done already.
Yeah, it felt really dense.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm sure you too, especially. So keeping with the theme of the journals and revealing your innermost thoughts in the journals, one thing that I thought was interesting was how Elizabeth's very dear friend Kate still felt like she didn't know her. And you have one passage in the book that I wanted to read. So she's reading the journals and she realized that she really didn't know her friend at all. And you said, to not recognize in someone close to you the things that make her who she is was a kind of negation. So it was almost a negation of the person that she was altogether, because her own close friend and even her husband didn't know her innermost thoughts and her true feelings. So that's kind of a striking thought, and I think that theme will certainly resonate with all of us. Any demographic, any stage of life, you can relate to those thoughts and feelings about and themes of secrecy and reinventing yourself. And some of it is wonderful because you have the opportunity to kind of remake yourself sometimes depending on the setting that you're in. But how did you choose that theme of kind of secrecy and the reinvention of oneself through these journals?
I'd say it was a curiosity actually that came to me. After my friend died, her husband asked me if I would field the media calls for the family, because I had a journalism background and he didn't want to have to speak to the newspapers, asking him to explain over and over again who his wife had been. And so I spent a better part of a week doing these phone calls and coming up with the sound bites that would define who my friend had been. And after it was over, it was incredibly humbling, really, to have had the responsibility and the great honor, I guess, to pick the quotes. And in newspapers, they only pick a sentence here or there. But it was also very disturbing to me because I wasn't sure if that's the way she would have wanted to be described. And those are the kinds of questions that really came to me, like, how well did I really know her? She wasn't my closest friend. She was a member of my group of friends. And we shared the mommy world together, but not all that much else. And that curiosity just spooled itself out, I'd actually say, for a number of years, until I blocked out the skeleton of the novel. And I knew that I wanted it to be about journals, and I wanted it to be about journals revealing a very different person than what someone had thought they'd known.
Okay, so asking the question that I'm going to ask, actually being your sister, is I've never read a book by anyone when I'm related to them, and especially when our lives have been so closely intertwined growing up together. So of course, every page that I'm reading in the book, I'm thinking, am I in this book? What did she say about me? I've got to be in here somewhere. Where's Dad? Where's Mom? So in keeping with that line of thinking, reading the book was such a funny experience because I would see little nuggets from our childhood or just funny stories, or a name would pop up here and there that related to our lives. And I'm going to digress for a minute here, but our parents are here. Our dad, Ron Bernier, and Mom isn't sitting with you. And it happens to be our father's birthday. So stand up, Dad. Happy birthday, Dad. So this does relate. I didn't just try to embarrass you. But the nugget is that in the book, one of the funny things that actually made me laugh out loud is you have this 1980s reference to the Sandra Boynton turkey and the phrase, "Don't let the turkeys get you down." Dad had crazy turkey paraphernalia growing up. Hats, baseball hats, t-shirts. Right? Don't let the turkeys get you down. So I instantly thought of Dad, and I'm cracking up as I read this. So That was to you, a plug to you. But my question is, I was wondering, do you purposely put these in to give your family members and friends a chuckle when reading the book? Of course, being selfish, it's all about me. Or is it just unconscious because it's your life, and I've shared some of your life, so I recognize those. But as a writer, do you ever put in funny things on purpose like that, or is it just the way it came out?
I know you want me to say yes, but no. I don't do funny things on purpose. I mean, everybody always asks me what parts of the book are autobiographical. I recognize this. I recognize the dog. There's certain things. There's a scene in the story where a dog is put to sleep, and
don't make us cry, Nichole.
But I was there when my dog was put to sleep, and it's I'd say it's sort of like what I was saying about the backdrop of September 11th and knowing what that anxiety is about, particularly for a first novel. It's hard enough to learn how to write fiction when you've never done it before, and to have to learn everything is very hard. So I didn't want to write historical fiction for my first book. I wanted to have a few things that I knew and that I understood. So it's kind of like having something comfortable in your back pocket if there's a few things you can relate to. I have a professional golfer in my book, and I used to be the golf ski editor for Condé Nast Traveler. I have a pastry chef in my book, and I used to do restaurant reviews for Boston Magazine, and I have several friends who are pastry chefs. So there are certain things that give you the launching pad to go off, but it's really just the germ of something. It's almost like if you have a character that has a certain anxiety, it might be a feeling that I've had myself, or a difficulty that I've seen a friend having, but then you just take that as the springboard, and then you blow it up. You just blow it wide open, and you just imagine what it would be like if that were a much larger trait in someone else. And that's the fun of inventing a fictional character, is that you can ascribe all these things, you take a little germ of what you know, and then blast the thing wide open.
It's fun to read it too. Recognize these funny little things. So, as the mother of 5 kids, you've got 5 kids, I've got 4. We know life is busy. How in the world do you find time to, do you carve out the time to write this book? And does it all happen on legislated time, or do you just grab snippets of time when you can?
Well, now that they're old enough to read and write, I actually farm out chapters to the different kids. My own little call center, I'm like, you do this chapter. They like that, that's why they signed the books last night. When I started it, my 3rd child was 6 months old, and when I finished it, my 5th child had just been born. And so I didn't always have 5 all along. In the beginning, it was nights and weekends, and whatever time, extra bits of time my husband would give me. And it was truly, when I say give me, I say it because it's a gift. It's the gift of time when you're a writer, to have time to go off by yourself and do this thing that's kind of an obsession. And it has to become an obsession, otherwise you won't do it, because it really is insane to sit and create fiction when no one's paying you to do it. And that was the hardest thing, coming from journalism. My point of reference is you get contracted to do a story, you turn it in, they pay you, and it appears in publication. And that's not the way it is all with fiction. You are plugging away over and over and over and revising it yourself before you even sell it, never knowing if it's going to ever see the light of day. And when you do have children, the guilt factor is tremendous, because you are now spending all this time on something away from your family that you don't know is ever going to amount to anything. And I wasn't willing to just call it a hobby. I'm very supportive and in awe of the people that can do it just as a hobby, but because I come from this background of journalism, I wasn't willing to do that. I had to feel like it was something. So I became obsessed, I did. And I gave up almost all my hobbies. I mean, you've run marathons, Dad has run marathons. I did not run a marathon. And I thought I was going to do a half marathon, and that fell by the wayside too. Any kind of competitive, serious working out, kind of downhill. I don't cook ambitiously anymore, I don't knit anymore, and I don't watch any television shows. So I'm really not very interesting to talk to at a cocktail party, because I can talk to you about characters and you don't know who they are or what they're doing or why they're doing it. But I have this thing, and that's kind of why this is so exciting tonight and last night, because I've been off in this place, kind of a little bit MIA from my family and my in-laws and friends, and kind of off doing this little crazy thing, and now I get to come forward and hand you all the book and say, this is where I've been spending all this time for the past 6 years, and it's kind of like a vacation house that I'm now inviting you all to come into. This is why I like this place. This is the place that I've built. Come hang out with me here, and I hope you feel as comfortable there as I do. And it really, that's the only way I can compare it, is that it's this place that I went off to, and now you can all come.
I have a question. Just out of curiosity, where did you write in your house, or did you have to leave the house? I mean, I can't even imagine. But I I would be curious. And then the other follow-up question that is, have you started multiple books, or you just decided to write a book and you wrote it?
The first answer is I started off writing in the house because that's where I lived, and I was doing this thing that I wouldn't even acknowledge was a thing, so I was doing it in the house. After we moved 3 times in the course of while I was writing the book. And then once we had 4 kids and then 5, I just couldn't work in the house, even with the babysitter, because I'd hear them making noise, even if I was in the attic. And it's a noise that I'm invested in, because I could hear them pummeling each other and dropping things and breaking things. And I just have to leave, I just have to go. And I actually work in quite a noisy coffee shop. And I know that seems very strange, but it's noise that I'm not invested in, and I overhear the most unbelievable conversations. So it's actually wonderful. If I really need quiet, I go to the library, and I've got to tell you, I am the biggest geek fan of libraries on this planet. And I've written about your library, I have. And I love best libraries, because this library is nominated by a lot of people for its environmentalism, how beautiful and high-tech and forward-thinking it is, and reprogramming. So libraries is where I do a lot of the writing. Second half was something else. Right?
Have you started, was this your first practice?
Yeah. I'm really unusual, and I'm kind of a flunky at fiction, I guess, because usually you've been practicing for a really long time, and you put some away in the drawer, and then finally you write something that's worth publishing. Mine was just as bad as everything that other people put in the drawer, but because I'm so stubborn and cheap with my time and the babysitting hours that I ended up putting into it, I wasn't willing to let it go. And so I revised it for an awfully long time until it was something that was ready to be published. And you know what? I'm so glad that I did. I am. So no, I don't have anything else in the drawer. I have 2 others that I'm dying to write. And I thought that I was going to do one, and now I can't wait to start another, but I just can't do more than one thing at once. So, and I don't know how long it's going to take me to write another book. So I'm determined to do right by this book and travel a lot this summer and just talk to anybody who will listen about it.
Are you one of those writers who always has paper and pencil with you and writes everything down that might be interesting someday, or might remind you of something, or might be useful at another time?
I do a little of that, but the funny thing is I didn't know any other writers of fiction, so I thought I just had these really weird little habits. Like I didn't know that was a common thing. And I'm not organized, I wasn't at the time organized enough to put it in a good place where I could actually find those snippets again. So I would do things like write on the back of a teacher, evaluation conference form for my kids, this thing that would come to mind like, and she really wanted to have that 3rd drink in the evening, but she knew her husband was watching. And then, and I'd turn in the form to the teacher, and then like evaluation, she'd say, you might want to have this. I think this is yours. And so I kind of write things in very inappropriate places, and thank God everyone knows that I'm a writer now, because it's kind of saved me a little bit. I do that, but I have to say, high tech has changed the world so much, and I keep a notepad next to my bed because I do have crazy dreams, and I write them down. Otherwise, I won't remember them. And they're important little things that come up from our subconscious, and that we'll overhear during the day. But mostly, what I do, I love my iPhone, I have to say, and I text myself messages. I put messages on the little sticky pad note board there. I email myself things because then they won't go away. And if I don't do that, there's just too much going on in our world and in my head, and I won't remember. I really won't remember important. Even little things that I thought that I loved and could not forget.
Just a follow-up. Do you love to eavesdrop?
Do I what?
Love to eavesdrop.
I love to eavesdrop. You know what it is? It's not the eavesdropping per se. It's when I hear a certain tone of voice. Do you know what I'm talking about? If you're sitting in a coffee shop or a restaurant and suddenly the voices go a little bit lower and then a level of tension comes into the voices, you know something really good is happening. I guess so.
This may be a bit of projection, but I'm taking with your title, The Unfinished Work of Elizabeth D., and your comment in terms of journal. And I'm wondering about the piece about how much we share or don't share of ourselves, and how much we keep confined in journals, and the loss of that when someone dies. And I wish you'd just speak to that a little.
Well, the title for me, this wasn't the original title. I went through about 2 or 3 before my agent says yes. That's it. They rejected all the others. And the kids actually don't remember the other ones too. To me, the unfinished work represented literally her unfinished work because they're journals, and the last bit was missing. So it left a bit of a mystery throughout the book. The other aspect of the work is that she had aspirations, very artistic aspirations, that she never completely fulfilled. And there's a very strong thread of that going through the book. And the third is that she herself was such a work in progress, as we all are, and she was not satisfied with who she was and where she had come from, and she was trying very consciously to make herself into someone else. And she was very much a work in progress that became revealed to all the people around her. And I actually have to give credit to Random House there. They were brilliant. I had no idea what they were going to do with the cover. Authors have no input on the cover, none. One day you just get an email that comes into your inbox, and they say, this thing you've been working on for 6 years, this is what it's going to look like. Get used to it. And what they were going for is the whole idea of a wrapped painting with the paper over the painting and the twine and the little bits of the beach shining through, because they spent so much time at the beach in the summer, the woman who inherits them. And I just really liked that. I thought it was different, and it kind of pops out with that 3D twine. So I think they captured the title well. I think they got it, which is really nice.
I'm hooked. I can't wait to get my hands on the book. Psychologically, when one invests oneself in a journal, there is a persona that perhaps one does not see, or you might see snippets of. In many novels, at the conclusion, there are acknowledgments. You thank the doctor that spoke to you, the psychologist you visited, to give you some insight into your characters. Did you see any so-called experts in various fields to give you a better understanding of how to portray this woman?
Not how to, I've kept journals my whole life, so I had a sense of how to craft journal entries, and actually the way I wrote the book, I wrote Elizabeth's entire life before I even wrote Kate's life at all. So I had an entire life in journals written with uninterrupted, and ended up throwing away about 75% of it. So, because it wasn't all relevant, but I needed to know who she was. So I invented her completely. I had to invent someone who had a variety of troubling experiences when she was younger. And I did talk to people who had some backgrounds in those situations. I have a dear friend who's a psychologist who specializes in different kind of traumatic situations, and I ran it by him. It was in a rough draft, and I thanked him in the acknowledgments. Interestingly, I wrote a blog post for our blog. We have a literary blog called Beyond the Margins, and it's daily essays about the craft and the business of writing fiction. And I wrote a blog post once about what inspired me to first start writing and first start keeping journals. And it was actually a 7th grade English teacher at Bedford Junior High in Westport. And she gave us an assignment that we had to start writing one day. And I had just moved here from Illinois, and I didn't know anyone, and I didn't dress as cool as the other kids. And I was very self-conscious, and I started using that as a place to vent those thoughts and those feelings. And the teacher, very wisely, just hung back. She didn't write comments in the margin. We had to turn it into her every week, but she didn't write anything. And it gave me the illusion that I was writing only for myself. And I have to say, it absolutely dates to 7th grade, beginning to write in 7th grade.
Hi, Nichole.
Uncle Danny.
I have 2 questions. Do your own journals that you've kept reflect the same in the book? In other words, do you keep, well, have you written in your journals what, are you showing yourself all, to all your friends, and are you keeping a little something?
Yeah. It's the book me.
Well, I know, yeah. The other one?
No.
No, not as you. I mean, do you actually, you know what I mean?
I do know
keep
exactly
back?
what you mean. There are a few scenes. For example, there's a scene where the character who's died, Elizabeth, is writing, and I'm trying to show a progression of her emotions in her comfort level becoming a mother and her warming to it. She took to it slowly. In her mind, she took to it slowly, and she was very self-conscious about that. And there's a scene where she's writing about her children with a real warmth in the holidays. And I took an anecdote directly out of her own life because it was in my journals, and I just love it so much. When my son was about 2.5, he was taking a nap, and I had decorated the banisters of our front stairs with garland going all the way down. And when he woke up from his nap and came down the stairs, he goes, "Mommy, while I was sleeping, bushes grew on the stairs. And I love that. And the only way you can remember things like that is by writing it down. I'd lose half the amazing things that my kids say if I didn't write them down. And I did go through my journals to try to remember what it was like to have a child who was this age and who was this age and who was this age. And so it was very helpful. And what was so nice is that it's truly spontaneous, because I had no idea that, that that's what I was doing. So it's little unusual things like that.
Right. Follow up? I have a question from Wellesley. Did your husband help you at all?
Husband's brother.
Did he just text that in?
Yeah.
Are you videotaping this and playing it live for Tom?
You can text and tweet to him that I did give him credit in the first question about how important when you need the time to write when you've got 5 children. So it was my time, the gift of time from my very generous husband.
Thank you, Tom.
No, but it actually, in all truth, you cannot do this unless you have someone in your life who is supportive. At least if you have children, I couldn't imagine doing it. And there was one time where I stopped writing it. I had finished the first draft. I did the real rookie error of trying to get an agent right away. I hadn't revised it because, hey, why should you revise it? You write, you get paid, you publish. That's the way you do it. And I submitted to about 10 agents, and I got turned down in the very nicest way possible. And I've learned since then that those are very high-quality rejections, and that rejections like that are actually a blessing when someone says, I see what you were trying to do, and you almost achieved it, but not quite. But I had a 4th child. I put them aside for a while. It took about 3 months. I wasn't doing any writing at all, and I've been writing just about every day for years. And after a while, my husband kind of cleared away the nursing material and the gliding chair and dug back out the manuscript, and he said, what are you doing? You have to pick this up in 3 months. Are you not going to write anymore? Are you done? And I said, no, I'm going to write. I'm going to write. I'm just figuring out what I'm going to do next. And then a letter came in the mail from an agent, and it was a very high-profile agent, and she wrote me a 3-page rejection letter outlining what she saw in the book and what she saw as being the real promise. And it really gave me hope. Her one big thing that she was afraid of was touching a book that had to deal with September 11th, and everyone was concerned about that. And I was told, you do not have the right to touch a big topic like this. It's too enormous to too many people, and they have their own feelings and sensibility about it. So I did sit down after Tom said, what are you doing? And I revised it for a year, and I put September 11th way in the background, and just tucked it in as sort of a atmospheric thing that provided a pressure for the main character who was living, but had no direct bearing on the family who had lost their mother. And it made it a much better book, made it a stronger book. And when I went to query again, bang. I mean, I got 3 agents at once who said, come down to New York, we want to meet you, and we want to offer representation. It made all the difference. But yes, Tom got me going again when I had that dark moment wandering in the desert with a newborn.
That being said, because I'm Lisa's neighbor, I have read the unpublished version, so I don't know if anything's changed.
Can't admit that publicly.
Unpublished versions of all the typos and all the
The typos, I've read published books with more typos than that book, just so you know. And I don't think I'm giving anything away with the plot line.
Just take one more second.
I don't think I am. The character does not die in 9/11. I think we've made that clear. She dies in another plane accident, and those of us
Just give something away.
Those of us, I'm sorry, those of us who do live in New York, you flip-flop the plane accident. Did you change that? Do you change that? Did agents give you a hard time with flip-flopping a big event?
They did, and that's actually one of the places where the journalism background came in handy. Nobody cared about that except for me, and I kept saying to my agent, my editor, hey, this plane crash actually happened before this one. It's fiction, it's okay. So in the back, actually, in my acknowledgments,
yeah, I noticed that.
I mentioned that
yes.
they actually there's a bombing in Bali that happened that following summer as well, and I had that happen a month earlier than it actually happened in real life. So I did take some liberties, but yeah, that was fiction.
Any other questions?
I think it's interesting, you said that the journals that she wrote, obviously you're telling a secret life of herself, that you said they were intended to be given to someone, or this person found them. So did she want someone to discover this part of her life, or was it an accident that they were found?
I'm not going to give anything away because it's actually right in the first chapter, so it doesn't impinge on anybody's discovery. She actually, the woman who dies, has left them in her will to her closest friend, and that becomes a source of tension right from the beginning, with the husband kind of wondering but trying to hide. Why is it that they were left to her? And in a bit of denial about what might be inside or what might not be inside, and right away you realize that there's something inside that he has seen that he should not have seen, that's made him uncomfortable. And he decides he doesn't want to know, he wants to bury it, put his head in the sand, move on, he's got 3 children. But that's kind of the question that goes throughout the whole novel. Why did she leave it to her friend, and why did she pick that friend, and what was she hoping to show her in that? Was there a message in there, or was it just having her say finally to someone that she trusted? I think Lisa has a question.
I'm always fascinated with this idea of writing as an expression of ourselves and what we reveal, and the difference between writing fiction and writing memoir. And I know one of the things when I write memoir, and I find it I find it very reassuring to know that my own words would speak for me after my death, especially if you have young children, and that you can reveal in those words exactly what you feel, and they will speak very truthfully for who you are and a more complete person that you are, that your children only know one side of you. And I'm curious, since you have your own, they're not published, but since you have your own journals, and now you have a work of fiction, which do you think represents you, and in what way? I guess if you had to choose one of the two to represent you, which would you choose? Or just how do you feel the two very different pieces represent you and who you truthfully are?
The best way I can answer that is that I started keeping a journal when I was in 7th grade, and I've kept journals my entire life. I have trunks full of journals. Once I really got deeply into writing this novel, I stopped keeping a journal. And I don't think that that's actually as telling as it sounds. I think it's that I finally had a creative outlet, and I didn't need to keep saying the same things over and over. I was done with that. And I think it's probably more than anything, it's a factor of getting older, and that there's more that's common and stable in my life now that I have 5 children and I'm married. Not that much changes on a day-to-day basis, and there's only so many times you can complain about making the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. I feel like there's something much more rewarding and creative right now about the fiction. I don't have any desire to write a memoir. That's just me. But I love reading well-done memoirs by people who really do it well. Like Dana Shapiro. We've talked about Dana Shapiro before. She writes beautifully. I think right now it's my fiction, I think, and also my nonfiction journalism that I've done for Condé Nast Traveler. I've had the great pleasure to do a lot of travel pieces for them, and I really had a great run of it in my 20s and 30s, taking fantastic trips, sometimes taking my kids with me, trying to
sometimes your sister.
Sometimes my sister. Yeah. We've done a few good ones. And I think those pieces are as much as anything else that I've done. It's the way you perceive the world when you move through it. And that's kind of the way I process information. Nothing quite feels understood or finished to me until I've found some way to write it down. And I think whether it's fiction or journals or nonfiction traveling narratives, it all kind of comes out in the end.
I really like the idea of, especially for women, the idea, and mothers, not being known. I think there's always a sense that you're not fully known because you parcel yourself out, and you are a certain way to your children and a certain way to your spouse and a certain way to your friends. But there is this kernel that, that kind of screams to be recognized and to be appreciated and to be known. And I really like that.
I have to say, it doesn't really answer your question, but it's just so meaningful to me that the process of writing this book and having my kids be involved in the writing of the book, because they really are. I mean, they know what I've been doing during the day when I'm gone for this pocket of time or overnight. And we have a lot of parties at our house, we have a lot of meetings with writers, we do a lot of readings at our house. And my kids are young, they're 11, 9, 6, 4, and 2. And they love when we have these events. They pass around the hors d'oeuvres, they take the coats at the door, they're doing everything shy. Believe me, I've tried to train them to sing the goodbye, farewell after each night song going up the stairs. It's just not working. But it's really, I'd say that it's shown the kids this other side of their mother's life, and they know it. They know that I love them dearly. They know that I love my writing dearly. They write little books on the sides. They do art projects, inventing their own covers of books. It's very easy to self-publish kids' books now on Lulu.com. I can have my kids write a collection of short stories over the summer, and at the end of the summer, I'll publish a book along with their illustrations, and it costs $20 on Lulu.com, and they have their own stories in there. It's fun, and I think that's the way that I've married both sides together of myself. I'm no longer only mom who wishes she were writing, I'm mom who's writing, and the kids are there doing it with me too. Did that answer your question? Yes. So
I have a question, speaking back to something you said earlier in the discussion, which was that this husband had asked you to speak on behalf of your friend, and she was just, a girlfriend within a group of friends. Did he in fact offer you anything, a scrapbook, a resume, I don't know, just some kind of thing that he wanted you to help shape your answers to the media? And also just the woman who was just speaking, I love that idea, separately speaking, about how many of us want a piece of ourselves to be known. And I think what you're doing with your kids is great. It's a great balance to say you can be a part of my life. It's very empowering, I think, especially to young girls. Mom can work and love you at the same time and be creative and produce something that's a little aside. But anyway, did he in fact offer you anything to help shape your comments?
They were actually, I didn't mean to portray them as not being close friends. They were at our wedding. I mean, I've known him for a long time. So I knew where she worked. I knew the struggles she had with finding a daycare that was right near her work. I mean, I knew the bones of it. And I did ask the family specifically, what's the statement that you want me to give? I will read a statement verbatim from you. And they did give me a statement verbatim. I said that I remembered her most running, road races. She did breast cancer road races all the time with the baby in the jogger. She had flaming red hair and the most ridiculous laugh you've ever heard in your life. You can hear it all the way down the block. And those are the sorts of things that made her vivid in the articles. I didn't say anything that he would have wanted me to say. Obviously, I ran it all by him first. But they were still, things of my invention, things that I would have chosen. And I wondered, it was always interesting to me that very few people asked about her job, even though she was a retail executive and she was traveling on a business trip. The only time her work ever came up was because that's where she was headed when she died. And it really struck me that it's not what we do that will be remembered for, unless we cure cancer or something like that, that it's really who we are to the people around us. Because everyone at her memorial service just talked about her being an unbelievable friend, so entertaining, so warm, the ridiculous laugh, the whole thing. So that's what I used to guide me.
I'm sorry, I'm sure I asked you a question. Writing and having kids, were you able to read these last 6 years, and how did you fit that in?
Well, now you're getting into secrets, and I think we're being taped on it's very hard for me to read also, and the thing that makes it, and I'm a slow reader, and the thing that also makes it hard is that I'm part of a writing group, and as part of what we do for one another, we read one another's manuscripts and works in progress. And so at any given time, I'm working on my own writing, I'm reading my friends' work, and now I'm starting to get manuscripts from strangers, and people asking me to give those little blurbs that go on the back of the book. And so what it quickly amounts to is that, all the books that we all see coming out and we see written about in the paper, I want to read those too, but I just don't have a lot of time to do it. So I'm hoping that with the tour this summer, that I'll be able to maybe do some audiobooks, and while I'm driving around, I'll listen to some on audio. I love Cheryl Strayed's book, Wild, that's come out. I'm about halfway through. I adore her. I know her a bit as a person, as a friend, and I really want to get through it. But there's just so many good books to read and not enough time.
Speaking of time, we have time for 2 more questions.
Okay.
So how has writing the book changed your relationship with women and what you share with women? Do you keep more secrets, less secrets?
It was actually a bit of a revelation to me as I worked on this book. It is so easy for us to move through the day, particularly when we encounter other, for me, mothers on the playground, in PTA, all these things, and there's so many people that kind of look a certain way and everything seems perfect. It might not be perfect for them. And in the rare times where someone gives you a chink in their armor and they offer that things aren't perfect, we kind of have 2 choices, don't we? We can kind of pretend like we haven't seen it and look away, or we can ask a follow-up question privately and say, hey, how you doing? And this is going on, and dig a little bit deeper. And I think sometimes all people need, and I wrote this through and I thought it through as I was writing, sometimes all people need is to have that question asked sincerely. And it's hard. I'm guilty as the next person. I've got a lot of kids and life is busy. I don't want to ask insincerely. I don't want to not ask that question. I don't have a whole bunch of time to be the primary hand holder for lots of people outside of the 10 little hands and the kitten's paws and everything else. But I think it's important to show what you really want to show and to look for signs from someone else that they might be trying to tell you something that they just don't feel welcome to.
Are you still in touch with your 7th grade teacher?
It's funny that you'd say that. I sent her an email 4 years ago. I tracked her down. I did a Google search. I found that she's living part-time in New Mexico and part-time in Portugal. She's gone more in the way of visual arts and education. And I sent her an email, and I told her that writing journals for her class in 7th grade, I did not think she would remember me, and she did. I don't know why. Probably because my clothes were so awful.
They were pretty bad, and my mom sewed them too.
No. She sewed my promise, that was fabulous. But I had plaid pants and like laced up leather shoes. I mean, I kind of looked like I was all ready for 2nd grade in a really earnest way. I was teasing in school, so she remembered me, and I thanked her for her, for her encouragement and for her anything. And I just asked her what she was doing, and she was thrilled. And she actually said something that was really lovely. She said, teachers kind of live to hear from students and hear that they made a difference, and thank you. And what actually inspired me is that my husband's grandfather, who had recently passed away, had been telling us in a nursing home about how much it mattered to him to hear from students. He'd been a conductor in Queens in an orchestra, and whenever he heard from students and got letters from students, he talked about how much that meant to him. And I thought, I should do this. So I did.
Send her a copy of your book.
I need to. I haven't done it yet. I haven't slept yet. It just came out yesterday. I am going to, absolutely.
It's going to be a while before you sleep.
What do you think, Erin?
I think we have to wrap up. Thank you all for coming. One last thing we have, in honor of the quote, "Don't let the turkeys get you down," we do have a birthday cake for our father. That's "Don't let the turkeys